The city is basically looking for ways to keep the city viable and to improve our tax base. And we partner with many agencies. EDC is one of them. They've come up with several financing tools to put into our toolbox to try and spur economic development within the city of Lebanon. The LERTA law allows the city, county, school district to not lose any taxes. It's just based on any improvements, basically a new building or an increase in square footage of a building, for there to be somewhat of a tax abatement. The proposal that's before you today would be a 100% tax abatement for the first 3 years on just the cost of the improvements, and then the last 2 years, year 4 and 5, a 50% tax abatement. And this is to try and entice developers to develop within the city limits. Over the course of years, there has been no development in the city of Lebanon, especially on the north side, without some type of enticement. And we can prove that. So this is really essential for us to move forward to get any type of new development within the city. I did bring the map. The area that's outlined in red, basically it's both sides of Cumberland Street, north and south sides. Because of obviously the development in the downtown, we wanted to make sure we included both sides of Cumberland Street. And it would be all the way north, you know, the perimeter of the city.
Lebanon City School District.
Yes, and a unanimous vote by the City Council and the school district. You're the last, and it's a historic moment for us. 2 years ago we had the City Summit. We put together a whole list of things, tactics to implement that my corporation will be involved in. And we put them all together. We've got the financing in order, we've got the new redevelopment corporation for the city in order, we have the branding and the marketing in order. One last thing is LERTA, and one last vote for LERTA today. And then we kick off revitalization of the city.
Questions. I guess I'd like to start by just telling a short story so you understand where I'm coming from. If you have a child who comes to you and wants to go to college, and think, wow, you know, this is great. But then you start thinking, well, gee, I have to do some due diligence here. What's it going to cost to send my child to college? How am I going to pay for this? Am I going to have to refinance my home? How are they going to eat? Where are they going to live? There's this whole series of questions you have to have answered. You don't just send your child off to college. So with that train of thought, I have a series of questions that I need answered. And I will start by prefacing the fact that we can't afford farmland preservation right now. Our funds are tight. Redeveloping in the city, again, on the surface sounds like such a fabulous idea. It's a great way to preserve farmland instead of going out into areas that are productive at this time. So my heart is saying yes, but my mind is saying do the due diligence. So, that being said, first of all, when I read the material provided back around February 14th, I think, that I finally received a copy of it. I understand, Mayor, that you did do something last year which did not make it to my desk, and I hope you understand that that was out of my control. I really was working on the premise that I received nothing, and that's why I was trying so hard to get information. But when I read this the information that was sent over around the 14th, I'm unclear. I'm reading one thing in the newspaper and I'm reading another thing in there. Is this just for commercial or is it for all properties? It is not clear to me when I'm reading your paperwork.
Yeah, I'm glad we had the opportunity to clear all your questions up today. The LERTA program applies to any business property, industrial, commercial property.
So it will not apply to residences,
It does not.
Period.
The ordinance in front of you does not apply to residents.
Okay. I needed to make sure I had that clear in my mind. It doesn't say that. You know, now if it's in the law and it's understood, but I couldn't find where it said that in the paperwork I got, and maybe I missed it, but,
Yeah.
you know, I may have missed it, but...
Yeah, it comes under eligible property in the ordinance, which is defined as industrial, commercial, or other business property.
Okay.
And if you're using the ordinance that we proposed, right in the
I only
summary.
got that.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to think. which paperwork we got. Was it the one we're passing or was it yours?
I haven't seen what you're
Okay.
passing,
All right.
but what we proposed as a sample ordinance for the county, it's throughout that whole document.
I
about
trust
it
you have the
being-
ordinance, you do have the ordinance that you're acting on.
Well, that's what I'm
It was in the
unclear of a lot of
email.
things.
It was in the email that we sent last September, and then I sent it again yesterday.
Yeah.
There were a whole bunch of documents.
What was sent was on the 14th was a resolution.
Yes, the
And-
resolution,
Okay,
that's what we're referring to.
So it's not an ordinance,
But-
it's a
Resolution,
resolution.
yes.
but it occurred to me about yesterday that the city passed an ordinance.
Yes,
So this needs to be done by ordinance
So it has to be advertised and go through 2 meetings?
or by resolution, because it was a resolution that was provided.
yes, you in the past have adopted, the city adopted an ordinance, the ordinance designates the eligible area. The other taxing bodies adopt a resolution,
Okay, well then we have the resolution,
yes,
but not an ordinance.
you have a resolution, which is,
Act that Charles sent, and it was like the first 3 pages, which was very helpful. Thank you. But my next question, which was on my original set of questions, was about revenue to be forgiven and percentage of participation. And in here, under section 2A, I think it would be actually on page 3 near the top. The ordinance or resolution shall specify a description of each such area as determined by the municipal governing body, as well as the cost of improvements per unit to be exempted, and the schedule of taxes exempted as herein after provided. That's my question in fancy legal terms.
and, yes, in this case, 100% of the cost is exempted.
So
for
you're
3
just
years.
doing it as percentages, you're not
Yeah.
actually giving the dollar amounts, and
No.
that's acceptable.
Yes, yeah.
I was looking for the dollar amounts, and that Sherry said you don't think you can calculate, and yet I was reading this to say you must calculate it.
No, it's, the amount you're exempting is 100% for
So
3
you're
years.
going by percentages?
Yes.
Okay, that answers that question. Do you have, from other cities, I know there are some cities, maybe Harrisburg, I'm not sure, or York, but some cities that have entire cities that are in this program. Because they have some sort of a record, have you checked into what the percentage is of people who take advantage of this? Is it 10% or is it 70%?
I did do to try and answer your question was I looked at, and obviously the LERTA wasn't in place all of last year in the city, but I looked at the zoning permits that were issued last year just in the LERTA, within the LERTA boundaries. And I went to Carl, who's the commercial assessor for the county, and I had him look at this list, and we had over $1 million worth of construction value in 2011 in this area. But when he looked at the list, there's only one project, which was storage garages on a concrete pad for an automobile place. That was a value of $20,000 that would even meet the LERTA, because it has to be either a new building or additional square footage. So all of these projects would not increase their taxes, so there would be no abatement to gain. So you almost have to look at the particulars of exactly what is the developer proposing to do, or it's just really difficult to answer. It's not that I don't want to answer it, it's that I don't know how to answer it.
Well, another part of my questioning was, do they make an application? So by the applications, you would know who's in the LERTA and
Yes,
who's not.
yes, and I have copies of the application, if you'd like to see one.
Yeah, I don't know that it came through, or else I didn't have time to open
They
it.
will
I
make
was
an
kind of rushing,
application.
trying to get it
On
all
that
done.
application, they would actually specify the estimated cost of new construction or improvements. I'll pass this down.
So the other towns should have applications, and again, I know that one specific area may not be exact, but if you're looking at several cities, you're going to get an average, and that's all I was looking at. I guess I'm trying to get my head around the dollars and cents.
I'm not aware of any study anyone has undertaken on LERTAs in the Pennsylvania cities. Perhaps someone has.
Right.
We know just from conversations with other cities, other economic development people, that it's worked, and they feel that they've attracted. It's widely used. I think every city in the state has it. And they don't have it because it doesn't work.
And
It's doing something for them.
And also, the county, city, and school district had LERTA in the 80s and 90s, and it worked very well to spur development at that time. We're asking for you to consider it again. And additionally, we do have a developer that that is considering coming into Lebanon City that could potentially bring 300 jobs, and I've been pushing for months to try and get this passed.
One of the things that was unclear to me, which Charles answered in his email this morning, was whether everybody expired in 5 years. If this is 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, everybody expired in 2017. If it started when the construction began or when the construction ended. His answer to me was, and I want to repeat this in case somebody else has the same question, that it expires at the end of construction. So that means that this is going to be staggered.
The abatement starts at the end of construction.
Okay.
When the building
When does the
permit-
LERTA end? Or is there no expiration to the LERTA? That's part of the question.
The abatement runs for 5 years.
Okay.
It begins at when the occupancy permit is issued. That's
So
when-
they
that's
could
when the 5
be
years runs.
in year 3 of our LERTA when they build, and they would only get 3 years of abatement.
No, I see your question.
You see where my
There is
question's
no
going?
termination built into this ordinance. It extends until the date you terminate it. When you repeal
So the county would
resolution,
have-
I gotta be careful my words here. It lasts until you repeal the resolution.
All right, so the county would physically have to do another resolution to repeal the LERTA.
Yes.
Otherwise, it is staggered for infinity, based on when they
Until at such
build.
time you determine, or we all determine, that there's sufficient tax revenue from the north end of the city that we no longer need it. It does not provide for anything like that. A taxpayer in a LERTA area can still appeal. They don't
They
lose their
can
rights.
appeal, and they will,
They do
because,
not lose the rights to appeal just because they're in the LERTA area.
so they can appeal, and they will not get kicked out of the LERTA. Okay, that's different than what I had read, so maybe that was something somebody inserted, like additional.
It could be some other jurisdictions, maybe they had a problem, and that was a way to resolve it. But that's not in our LERTA. We have a very business-friendly LERTA.
Well, that takes a big relief off my mind, because with these assessment appeals that are coming in, it's gonna be mayhem, and I didn't know if this was gonna complicate things and/or butt heads
There's
with.
no effect.
Okay. And then we are revenue neutral, which you confirmed after the reassessment, and this then, because you're saying appeals are not affected, it will be totally revenue neutral, and there will be no consequences for anyone when it
No.
comes to the reassessment.
You will enjoy increased tax revenue as a result of the improvements.
Okay.
You don't have to be concerned about being neutral on that.
Okay. Then I think I'm down to 2 questions. So this next one, so I don't know how many, if any at all, of these abatements are, or, set-asides for infrastructure, whatever, depending if it's a TIF, a COS, or a LERTA, are in effect now. And by doing this, will we create double dippers?
No, the answer is that. In this area, there are no TIFs, and you cannot double dip with a TIF and a LERTA. Throwing out
That's against the
acronyms.
law?
Well, it doesn't work in practice, because the taxes from a property improvement have to pay the bond. You can't abate the taxes because you have to retire a bond. So they're incompatible. In no case is there a TIF in this area that would conflict with a LERTA tax abatement.
Okay, and I still would like that in a reasonable short time, so
What
I
is it
can
you would like?
confirm all this. A list of any TIFs, COS, or LERTAs in the county that are still in effect.
Okay, that we can do.
I really would like that, so when I have these kinds of questions, I can visually see, I'm not taking someone's word for it. I don't mean to be disrespectful, because I know you had no control over it. But at one point, people sat here and guaranteed us that with a COS, there would be no appeal. And then, when
You
the
cannot
business got
appeal a TIF.
sold,
Yeah, you cannot appeal a TIF assessment while the bond is still open, not repaid. Property owners within a TIF district, and I know this is complex and confusing, cannot appeal. And I think you've probably heard both, and I can understand why it could be confusing to you.
yeah, and it was not in writing, so I like to get things in writing, so I have them for reference, and so I can digest them and fully understand them. But at any rate, there were 2 appeals that I was totally blindsided by, because I was under the impression we were not going to have appeals in that particular program. Okay, and the final question that I have. Again, this is something I found online, but I couldn't find it in this section of the law that I got, so I want to have this confirmed, and also if you could follow up if it turns out to be. Failure to pay real estate taxes within the calendar year in which the taxes become due will result in the property being dismissed from the LERTA program. Any appeal, somebody doesn't pay their real estate taxes, do they get dismissed from the LERTA?
No, if there's delinquent taxes, whatever your provisions are for delinquent taxes still apply. The LERTA does not affect that.
So they're not kicked out of the LERTA?
Well, you're gonna follow up with your delinquent processes, whatever it is. In the course of that, they sell that to another company that can then pick up those taxes, they'll enjoy that LERTA abatement. If they're still
I
remains in
understand it
5
can be
years.
passed on, but if they're delinquent in their taxes, they still get that abatement.
They're still eligible for the LERTA abatement. But you can't take an abatement until you pay a tax.
That's true, but then you would have if they aren't paying it, you would file a lien against the property and
Yes.
you would get your money back.
Yes.
And I just need to know the rules.
Your normal
before
delinquent
I vote.
procedure will still apply.
Okay,
They're not exempt from delinquent procedures because they're in a LERTA area.
okay, you've answered all my questions,
very
thank
good.
you,
Glad we had the opportunity to do that.
thank you. Can the same business apply again and again? They're, successful beyond our wildest dreams.
Oh, yes.
And they keep expanding, the same person can have multiple tiered LERTAs
Oh, yes.
going on at the same time.
I like to see that. Yeah, you could keep, as long as the resolution's in effect, if we can keep encouraging expansions, this is exactly what we want. We want that new tax revenue, we want jobs, we want the income tax, wage tax, yeah. Let them keep going. Let's not stand in their way.
What would happen, and again, my mind just keeps racing here, what would happen if, here's a successful business who wants to expand, here's a residence or a business that is paying full property taxes and is not expanding, but he sells to this guy is already on the tax rolls. If he tears that building down and starts over, is he still going to pay on the tax before it was ripped down?
Yes.
Okay.
The tax as it was at the time they applied for the building permit is fixed. You will collect that.
Before